Welcome to today's episode of How Women Inspire. You're in for a treat today. You are going to meet the CEO and founder of game-changing science for endocrine disorders. Let me back up and tell you a little bit more about her. Her PhD is from the University of California, and she developed a novel type 1 diabetes cell encapsulation device to overcome immune challenges of current islet therapy. And this is really the foundation for what she's doing today in Encellin as the CEO and founder. I am honored today that you're going to meet Crystal Nyitray, who is leading this game-changing science and technology. She's been through Y Combinator and is really pushing the envelopes for all of us, both as a female scientist, but also with game-changing medicine. Welcome, Crystal. Wonderful to
Thank you
have
so
you.
much. It's truly a pleasure to be here and really grateful for the continued enthusiasm and support for what we're doing and our team in general.
Well, and of course, we found Crystal and we invested in her with our fund too at How Women Invest, and can't wait to see her journey into the future, which is really revolutionizing and changing. So people are no longer, tell us more about the science. When I brag about you, I tell people that insulin can sometimes push people into having their sugar crashes, and that's often a cause of people's, even death, right? So tell us a little bit about what the motivation is and what is the science.
Yeah, absolutely. So we really think about this from the perspective of a cell and really coming at it thinking that the cell is basically the original smart machine. And cells in general play these really complex roles to ensure our health and safety. And when they're missing, damaged, broken, or any of the above, that they're just not functioning like they should, that's really the basis of disease. And diabetes is a perfect example of that, where you have a cell that is responsible for measuring your blood sugar and secreting insulin is no longer there. So our approach was very simple. We wanted to create a technology that would help put that cell back in the body so that it can return that normal function. So we developed an encapsulated cell replacement therapy. We call it an insert that helps these cells survive in the body. It allows the enclosed cells to function like little smart factories. They can measure the body's blood sugar while they're inside of this pouch and then secrete molecules such as insulin to the patient at the amount that they need it, at the time they need it. So it's like a little mini transplant, a little mini organ, smart cell that's providing medicine on demand.
Oh my goodness, this is fantastic. How is this going to change medicine into the future? I mean, this isn't just for diabetes, right?
Absolutely. And that I think is one of the most exciting things about what we're doing is, so I'm a chemist by training. I did my PhD at UCSF and really started to realize during the beginning of my career that chemistry is very challenging. You have to make these complex molecules, these complex proteins or peptides. Then you have to find a way to get them into the body. You have to give them at the specific time. And that's assuming that every human is the same. And we know that not every human is the same. We're all very different. So I really started to think a lot about how can we create a system that we can deliver medicine specific to that person's particular needs, their lifestyle and everything, and really fell in love with this idea of leveraging cells as these smart molecular factories. And that's really where the core of this came from, was thinking about how can we help these cells treat different diseases in a customized approach specific to that individual. And that was really the exciting core of it, of what we decided. And when you can do that, and when you can leverage cells for producing drugs on demand, you can treat a whole bunch of different diseases. Diabetes is really only the tip of the iceberg. You can think about more broadly almost any disease that would benefit from the secretion or delivery of a soluble factor, going all the way down to thinking about, like, imagine a system in which you could address pain. Let's say, oh my goodness, my body feels pain. And then you could specifically deal with the delivery of some sort of anti-inflammatory. That's far out there science, but that's really what cells can do, is because they have this innate ability to both measure and respond. And we really wanted to harness that capability for much more simpler diseases.
In so many parts of science and medicine right now, I'll have an experience and I'm like, this cannot be where we're at with medicine today. And you look at technology and AI and all the things that are on the other side of our lives, right? It feels so advanced and we can do smart things. We can be responsive to the environment. This is absolutely, to me, this is what we're supposed to be doing at this stage in terms of science. How come nobody else is really actually figured this out before. Are other people working on this and you were the one to figure it out, Crystal?
It's an interesting question. And it's something that we think a lot about is like, why Encellin and why now? And ultimately, I think it comes down to a couple of really being at the right place at the right time, and UCSF being a phenomenal institution, is that we get to stand on the benefit of now in this time having these unique capabilities to modify cells. If we would have tried to do this 10, 20 years ago, we didn't have the ability to specifically edit cells with technologies like CRISPR. Now we can really play with this biology toolkit to use cells in a very different way. And I think that's very beneficial and a benefit of being in the science right now. I think the other part of it is that we're starting to recognize not only the ability to edit cells as tools, but also the more dynamic nature of medicine between different population genetics and how that will affect how you want to dose somebody. We have the benefit of knowing that there is a significant advantage to particular personalized medicine doses, severity of diseases. So we can sort of bring those two needs of we need to have a way of providing specific medicine for different types of people and different needs. And at the same time, now we have this capability to play this game and to use this biology. So we really wanted to sort of like bridge those two gaps as to how we can address it. And I think that's what we were uniquely positioned to do. I think also startups have this fun opportunity to just try some really cool science that can help people. We have the luxury of risk to try something very different. And I think that's an area where startups can really shine and hopefully help advance medicine significantly.
You look like a kid in a candy shop when you say that. That was very sweet to see your response and how you talk about this huge opportunity to play and to figure out solutions. I mean, what a gorgeous, yummy thing to do. Is there something about you as a woman or you in your own life that brings specific insights or passions forward? What's motivating you, Crystal?
Yeah,
why are you the gal for the job?
I get this question of like, do I have type 1 diabetes? I care a lot about diabetes. And ultimately, I think being the individual that I am leading this company, what I've learned is women and minorities are very used to being the first or different. I'm a first generation American, and a lot of the things that I do are the first. I'm the first to do certain things, and that's you get a comfort with discomfort. And I think that's a real value that is not appreciated a lot of the times. So when you think about starting a company and you're going to do your first financing, you've never done a financing, you're going to do your first clinical trial, you've never done a clinical trial. Those are very scary concepts, but fundamentally, if you can get comfortable with recognizing that just because you're new and it's different, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's bad. I actually really believe that having the luxury of no preconceived notions gives you the opportunity to think differently. And that's something that I value. And I have a really great group of CEO girlfriends, and we talk about this. I think that's one of I'd love to see the data on this, but I think that's something that's really neat is that, and I think this goes beyond women, and I think it's just really people that have experienced doing things differently, and diversity and minorities, is that you have a comfort around just being different. And that allows you to approach the world in a totally different experience, which has many pros and equally many cons. But if we can really harness this ability to think differently, I think that's how we're going to impact change. I look to see technologies that have been truly disruptive in the past couple of years. And I mentioned CRISPR, and that's one example. That's a great example of a technology that has totally changed things. And what's also interesting about that story is CRISPR-Cas9 was actually the second one that came out. The first one, the IP got passed up on. So I think it's really that opportunity to just be comfortable with discomfort that gives us this unique advantage to try things differently. No one else was leveraging cell for a very long time. This is now becoming very popular. But when we were starting, the idea of leveraging cells as smart molecular factories was not very popular, not very common. I'm not gonna say it wasn't popular. It wasn't as common as it is now. And I think we're seeing more of that happening. So I think it's a real comfort around discomfort. And I think back to making the decision to start the company and move this forward is it really came from this overwhelming sense of responsibility. I saw the preclinical data. The company's technology was built off of my PhD work at UCSF. And it became very apparent to me very quickly that the work that we were doing had significant potential to help a lot of people. But if I wasn't working on it, it wasn't going to advance. And there was no vehicle and it really needed to be a commercial vehicle to try to advance this to patients where it can benefit. So if I really believed in what we were doing and wanted to see it move forward, that was what needed to happen. We needed to form a company. I needed to lead it forward and advance it. And that was really it. I wanted to see this have potential and felt like we had, I always think about if we could do a fraction of what I think we can do, we can fundamentally change the landscape of medicine. And that seemed like such a risk not to take. It seemed obvious that it had to be done. So if nobody else was going to do it, I felt like, well, I guess I have to do it.
I'm not asking for permission anymore. I'm not asking for a seat at the table. My friends, this is the first generation of us. We have a huge opportunity. We have power and influence and wealth. And we can start building the tables where we get the prime seats. Today, we want to invite you to join us as investors in venture. I know no one's asked you to do it before. It might be something that seems scary or foreign, but I promise you it's not that different than investing in a mutual fund where your retirement funds are. I want you to lean in and just learn a little bit more. How about making a commitment that in the next 12 months, you can give yourself 12 months to figure it out and to take a step. I want to invite you to be part of the new table of power and influence and wealth. You're invited. I want to sit at the table with you because we're going to make big change. We're going to make the world we've been dreaming of. This is beautiful. And thank you on behalf of all of us for making sure that this wasn't just a science exercise, that this turns into a real commercial company that's viable and is going to solve problems into the future and be so game changing. Let's talk about you now as a founder and as an entrepreneur. What are your biggest learnings in this journey? Because this is your first rodeo as a founder of a company. Yeah.
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about this with the beginning of the year, and everybody thinks about their New Year's resolutions and their corporate goals and their personal goals and their milestones. And one of the things that I've realized over the past couple of years, especially when we got our clinical trial approved for our first in human study, was you can do audacious things when you try. And for a while, I will fully admit that I thought that I needed to have specific things under my belt to be able to do this successfully. And what I've learned over the past couple of years is I think there is an advantage, or let's say at least not a disadvantage, to some of our perceived weaknesses. As a first-time CEO, I did not have a deep Rolodex of experience in terms of fundraising or clinical trials, which could seem like a disadvantage. But what that allowed us to do was it allowed us to think about things very strategically from first principles. We designed a clinical trial based off of what was actually needed versus what everybody said, oh, this is how it should be done. And I think that's really critical. When we built relationships with investors, you can say, oh, well, this is a great investor. I was like, well, I need to understand my relationship with these investors. And I think that's really critical. So it allowed us to really ensure that we were building things for the right reasons with the right people instead of going off of a template, which obviously there's a lot of upfront work in that. I'm not going to deny that, but it also really gave us this luxury of picking the right people and picking the right problems because we had the luxury of choice. So I think that's really your initial question of what are the big learnings is accept where you're at and recognize that for the disadvantage of not knowing, let's say, a deep Rolodex, I'll give an example of investors. The advantage is that you have the luxury of building new relationships from the beginning, which ultimately I think has been much better for us.
Yeah, fantastic. One of the things that I know is, and it's been proven over and over, and I just don't think people really get this in their bones, is being an immigrant and being the first literally equates to certain personality traits and behaviors that make you an amazing entrepreneur. And this is something you just talked about in your own personal journey. And I just want to sort of reflect back to you that problem solving, I'll figure it out. Sure, I don't have all the networks, but I'm going to go ahead and find those people. Like that is literally the definition of both the immigrant experience and also being an entrepreneur. And it bodes well for you for the future. When you are thinking about sort of what's next for the company and for you, what are the biggest opportunities? And is there anything that you really want help with, that you want people to know? Like, we'll have maybe 10,000 people listen to this podcast. What do you want every single one of them to know and to do?
I believe in this concept of social consciousness and the idea that when you're trying to impact big change, one of the very critical things that you need to do is to let the world know what you're doing so that the world can be ready for the change you're trying to impact. And what I'm most excited about is really our upcoming clinical trial. And there are a lot of components that go into that, being site related, being production, being quality, being clinical feedback, being strategic advisors. There's all of that, from the very technical to like the very small details of what does the shape of your packaging look like. All of that is really critical. And I am so incredibly excited to take this technology to the next level and to place it into humans. If I could be that first recipient, I would 100% be there. I would absolutely do that. Now, my ask for the community is a little bit squishy. And what I mean by that is Enccellin's vision is to fundamentally change the landscape of medicine by leveraging the power of cells as smart molecular factories, starting with type 1 diabetes. There's a lot that needs to go into that, sharing the excitement about what we're doing in our clinical trial to support enrollment. So if there are groups that want to help share what we're doing, that would be fantastic. If there are groups that want to be able to provide strategic guidance on the clinical trial, as a company that's open to learning, we're open to learning. So if people think that they can be helpful along that journey, I encourage them to reach out, because we are always learning and you don't see your blind spots. So if there are areas where people think they could be helpful and we're not immediately thinking about it, I'm absolutely open to those relationships.
Well, we need the world to be ready for this innovation and to really understand. And I love your passion just comes through, Crystal. It's such a beautiful thing to be able to support you. So one, how can people find you if they want to be supportive or otherwise watch your science evolve?
Absolutely. So you can absolutely reach out to me on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is absolutely the way to go. You can find me through our website and Encellin, and that has a link to my LinkedIn. And from there we can connect. I'm not super active on other social medias. I am occasionally on Twitter, but I'm not, sorry.
Hard to find time for that. You gotta get
Yeah,
this.
so I have not prioritized it, but absolutely reach out to me through LinkedIn. I'd be happy to connect and learn and share.
So we're almost out of time, but as a final question to you, if there is a young woman listening to this today, what is your advice to her? What do you want her to know? Somebody who's green and young and ready to fly.
I say go for it. Try it. Starting a company and jumping this sort of I think of it as like leaping off of a high dive. You know, at some point you absolutely have to make that decision to jump and off, not just continue to bounce on the high dive board. And it's challenging, and the highs are high and the lows are low. But if you really want to try, I think there's nothing else quite like it. It is such a blessing and such a privilege to be able to lead a company and a team and develop a product that has this potential.
What an inspiration you are. Your passion is infectious. I'm walking away with such a big smile on my face today, and I hope everyone listening thinks about how in your life can you embrace a little bit of what Crystal's attitude is, which is, hey, listen, no one's ever done this. No one's ever been there. It's ready for you to break that glass ceiling and to move that forward. Thank you so much for your passion, commitment to solve this critical issues that we all have and to make science better and
Thank you so
medicine.
much. It was a pleasure.